Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're exploring a concept that, well, it might sound just a little bit dark at first, but stick with me because I promise you it's actually one of the absolute most powerful, life-affirming tools ever devised. We are talking about memento mori. Now, society usually tells us to look away from death, right? To avoid thinking about it at literally all costs. But what if our modern avoidance is actually making us miserable? What if actively reflecting on our mortality isn't some weird, morbid fascination, but an ancient key to unlocking true joy, meaning, and a real sense of urgency right now, in the present?
Okay, let's dive into this. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That is a pretty jarring thought. From the great Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. And actually, I want to break the fourth wall for a second here. I want you to honestly answer this for yourself. How would your behavior change right this very minute if you knew today was your last? Honestly, would you still be stressed out about that passive-aggressive email you got this morning? Would you really hold on to that old grudge? You see, Marcus Aurelius wasn't trying to be depressing here. He was using this thought to snap himself awake to the reality of the present moment.
So what exactly does this term mean? Memento mori is Latin for remember that you have to die, or, simply remember your death. And philosophers, from Socrates all the way to modern thinkers, they haven't used this concept to create fear. Actually, it's quite the opposite. They've used it as a psychological tool to create priority, to create meaning, and ultimately freedom. Because think about it, when you really accept that your time here is finite, you suddenly stop wasting it on things that just don't matter. Section 1. Remember you will die. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that actively meditating on mortality isn't just some new, trendy self-help hack. The ancient Romans practically institutionalized the whole concept. Picture this, a Roman triumph. A victorious general is parading through the streets, the crowds are going absolutely wild, and he is experiencing the absolute peak of earthly glory and power. But stationed right behind him in his chariot is a public slave. And that slave's entire job, literally his only job, is to periodically whisper in the general's ear, "Look behind. Remember you are mortal. Remember you must die." Even at the absolute height of human achievement, they recognized this desperate need to keep the ego in check with the ultimate humbling truth. And the Romans even brought this idea to their dinner parties, if you can believe it. 2,000 years ago, it was super common to hand out these little silver cups or tiny bronze skeletons. They called them larva convivialis as party favors. These little items often depicted famous philosophers, so you'd have Zeno of Citium over here representing Stoicism, basically urging people to live virtuously because, well, life is finite. And then right next to him, Epictetus, urging people to grab the joys of life while they still can. And while their approaches definitely differed, they both ultimately agreed on one core truth. The impermanence of life is exactly what makes it so incredibly valuable. Section 2. Visualizing the inevitable. Over time, humanity shifted from simply talking about death to actually creating physical art to represent it. People needed tangible reminders to keep this really powerful philosophy top of mind. And this brilliantly illustrates that shift. In the 17th century, a whole genre of still life painting emerged in Europe, known as Vanitas. Take Philippe de Champagne's famous still life with a skull. The artist essentially stripped existence down to 3 bare essentials. First, you have the tulip, which represents the fleeting beauty of life. Then the skull, which is a pretty stark representation of death. And finally, the hourglass, showing the relentless passage of time. These paintings were intentionally designed to remind wealthy viewers of the worthlessness of worldly goods. You really can't take your money or your status with you. Then, right around the era of the bubonic plague, an even more terrifying but deeply equalizing art form really took hold: the danse macabre, or the dance of death. This was a medieval allegory that was frequently painted right on church walls. It depicted a skeleton, literally the personification of death, taking the hands of people from all walks of life. An emperor, a high-ranking bishop, a common peasant, it didn't matter. The visual message there was just undeniable. Wealth, power, status, none of it can save anyone from the inevitable. Death comes for us all indiscriminately. Later on, starting in the 17th century, and really peaking during the Victorian era, the expression of memento mori became deeply, deeply personal through something called mourning jewelry. And this is kind of wild to think about today, but people would actually take the physical hair or even the teeth of a deceased loved one and weave them into rings, brooches, or lockets. They'd engrave the exact date of death right on the back. By wearing these items, they literally carried a physical piece of life's fragility with them everywhere they went. It was this tangible, daily anchor to reality. Section 3. A global philosophy. Now, thinking about death is definitely not just a Western or a Stoic phenomenon. It's really a universal human coping mechanism. For instance, in Buddhism, there's Maranasati, which is the practice of meditating on the absolute certainty of death to awaken spiritual awareness. Over in Mexican culture, the Day of the Dead brilliantly celebrates mortality using sugar skulls and comedic poetry. In Islam, Tadhkirat al Mawt involves visiting graveyards specifically to ponder the vanity of the material world. And back in Puritan America, they carve these really stark winged skulls into gravestones to remind the living of their earthly end. We're talking about completely different cultures here, all independently realizing that confronting death is a universal remedy for the human condition. Section 4, Living Fully Today. Let's move to and see how this builds into our actual lives. We've looked at the history, we've looked at the art, but how do we actually apply this massive paradigm shift to our highly distracted modern day-to-day? Well, the great essayist Michel de Montaigne summed it up pretty perfectly. To practice death is to practice freedom. A man who has learned how to die has unlearned how to be a slave. Let's unpack that for a second. When you realize you are literally dying every single minute, that the time passing behind you already belongs to death, you stop being a slave. You stop being a slave to trivial drama, to procrastination, to the constant fear of what other people think of you. You become free to actually live. So here is a highly actionable daily routine for you, inspired by the Stoics Seneca and Epictetus. Step 1. When you wake up, just mentally acknowledge that you might not survive the day. I know it sounds intense, but it instantly clears away that morning brain fog. Step 2. Carry a physical reminder. Some people carry a Memento Mori coin right in their pocket to touch whenever they feel stressed. Step 3. Stop postponing what actually matters. Seriously, stop wasting your one non-renewable resource on doom scrolling or getting into toxic arguments online. You just don't have forever to write that book or make amends or enjoy time with your family. Do it now. So the crucial point is beautifully captured in this epitaph found in an old Revolutionary War cemetery. Verses on tombstones are but idly spent. The living character is the monument. A good life isn't about leaving behind some massive empire or hoarding wealth or aiming for posthumous fame. The Stoics tell us pretty clearly, you won't be around to enjoy any of that anyway. What actually matters is the character you forge and the actions you take for the common good today. Your character is your true monument. I want to leave you with one final lingering question to ask yourself today. If today was your last, what would you stop doing? Right now. What trivial anxiety, what totally useless argument, what time-wasting habit would you instantly drop? Use Memento Mori not to despair, but to cut out the essential. Let it invigorate you. Remember, you must die so you can finally start truly living your life right now. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.